Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara's at work. She should be home anytime though. And today we are talking about micro bevels. First we will talk about what a micro bevel is, then what they're used for and why they're used, how to do them, and then I'm going to talk about why I don't like them, and then basically the only time I ever use them. So first up, what is a micro bevel? Okay, so picture this is your knife, this is your edge. So the knife, the edge, and then this down here is like a stone and a knife laid down on a stone like that for sharpening. Let's go back up to here to the edges. So a micro bevel basically is when you take the tip and you basically cut it off and put another edge at the tip. Just picture if that's perfect. So you'll basically remove this and put a secondary tip on your edge. Somewhat of an example is Rockstead knives. You see their edge bevel, and then the part that doesn't have the black on it, the DLC coating, is like a micro bevel. So that's pretty much like an example of one. Now what they're used for a lot of times, now there's a bunch of different reasons, but some people use them because it makes their edge stronger. So by having the tip of the edge as thin as it is and as sharp as it is, they might not need that level of sharpness and they need strength more. So they'll create a micro bevel and then their edge will be stronger, but it won't be as sharp though. And it's not going to pass through materials as easily because it's going to have two shelves to pass over. This shelf and this shelf to pass, going through materials. Because this is going to be a corner now, and then so is the top of the edge. And then some people, I guess, use them to kind of save steel, because what they'll do is they will continue putting micro bevels on every time instead of just doing a full-blown sharpening. But what winds up happening is that when you get to this point, you're about as dull as you can get for a knife, instead of just resharpening the entire edge every time. Granted, you didn't lose that bit of steel every time you sharpen it, but your knife isn't going to be sharp after a couple times. At least it's not going to be passing through materials as easily, because every time you put another micro bevel on, it's becoming more shallow and more shallow and more shallow of an angle. Now, they're used for blades or edges that you're going to be harder on, that are going to take more abuse, I guess you could say. So it needs to be a stronger edge and doesn't necessarily need to be razor sharp. It needs to be strong. So that's like a good time, I guess, to do one. I personally don't really like them, and I'll explain more into that in a second. But also, sometimes like you have a knife that's very thin and the edge itself is just going to be a micro bevel. Now, under those circumstances, it's understandable because you're not going to lay the edge back really far on something that's very, very thin. Like, I don't know, like a little slip joint or something. Those, you can kind of understand having a micro bevel on. But in their conditions, that's their entire edge. What we're talking about right now is putting a micro bevel on top of your edge. Now, how do you do them? So one way is if you have your knife laid on the stone after you're done sharpening and you're basically finishing off, you can raise it up and just scratch the tip basically at a higher angle. So let's say this was 17 degrees, you raise it up to 20 degrees or 22 degrees, whatever, and do a couple passes on the tip. Not a lot. You literally just do a couple passes on each side to put in the micro bevel. Now another way is with a ceramic rod. You would take the ceramic rod after you're done sharpening and hold it at a higher angle than you sharpen. Say if I sharpen this at this angle on a stone, I would come up to this and put it at a higher angle and do 2 passes and 2 passes and maybe 1 pass, 1 pass, 1 pass, 1 pass, and that would create a micro bevel. So then now I have a micro bevel on this thing. Now you'll hear from a lot of people that say, or that do that, and they do that so that their edge is stronger, so it lasts longer, and you know, and that, I'm sure that's true. I personally don't like it because I prefer sharpness. I want my edge to be very, very sharp. And in my opinion, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be after I've used it. So like, say I've had my knife and I've used it for the day and I don't have time to do a full-blown sharpening, or maybe I'm in a rush or something like that, I might hit it a couple times on very lightly though, and just basically knock off my you know, a little bit of the damage that I've done, and then I'll go to a strop. But usually I'll take a flat stone and I'll just hone my edge back. So I usually won't do that. Usually I will just hone it back. That way I'm keeping my same angle that I already sharpened at, and I'm just basically putting my edge back on my knife. And then stropping. And then if there's so much damage that honing it won't work, then I will go and I'll just put a new edge on it. Now I can kind of understand with, say, like say a fixed blade that you're going to be chopping with maybe, but usually for what I do is I would just put a convex edge on it. I would, instead of doing a V grind, if I really want a strong edge, well, there's 2 things you can do. One, you don't have to lay your edge back so fine. You could just sharpen your edge at a lower angle, right? So instead of doing a 15-degree angle or a 17-degree angle, sharpen your edge at a 20-degree angle and it'll be stronger. Or 2, just convex it. So basically where you're just going like this, you're not going to have a straight shot, and that way behind the edge is thicker right there, rather than it being thinner right here. It's a little thicker and it's a little stronger, and then you can still keep a level of sharpness that you want rather than putting a micro bevel. I just find that it's, and for me, and remember, just like with anything, like there's guys that carry machetes on their hip, you know, and that's not, you know, for me. I would rather carry, you know, I don't know, a griptilian or something, or whatever knife I want to carry. Just like there's knives that carry slip joints at the bottom of their pocket. I don't really do that either. Everybody's different. So everybody's needs are going to be differently, just like this. You know, depending on the media you're cutting, how you cut, how you sharpen, what your sharpening things are, like what you have to sharpen and use. You know, even your budget, all of this comes into play with sharpening and the knives you use. So just because I don't do it doesn't mean it's not going to work for somebody else, and a lot of people it does work for. I mean, they like it. I don't prefer it. Now, like I said, the one time when I do think it's, you know, like when I do will do it, I should say, is basically when I have some little chips in my edge that I can easily get out, but I can't strop them out, and I'll just put a quick micro bevel on there. But usually when I do that, I'm planning on sharpening pretty soon. Like, I'm not planning on keeping my edge like that for long. I'm just going to use it for the rest of the day, or maybe even a couple more days, and then I'll put an edge on it. Now, going back to this, look at these as, you know, different angles. Like I was saying, if you have a 17-degree angle and you're getting a lot of chipping, or you don't find your edge being strong enough for you, well, move it up to 20 degrees. You know, and if you're still having the same problem, you can go to 22 degrees or something. If you don't want to do the micro bevel thing. Now let's talk about how you can do it. So there's a couple ways, like I was just showing before. So if I normally am sharpening right here at the very end, I'll pick it up nice and tall and scribe it. And you want to make sure your angle's right on both sides and the same on both sides. Now another way is with, like I said, the ceramic rod. And you would only do it a couple times because it's such a small amount of steel you're removing that it doesn't have to be a lot. Like, you're not, otherwise you'll wind up doing more damage than you want to, or whatever. So, but also, like I said though, if you keep doing that over and over, you're going to wind up with an edge that isn't an edge no more. It's going to be, you know, you say if you did it 1, 2, 3 times, I mean, look at what you're cutting with now. You're not, I mean, it wouldn't cut very well at all. It'd be good as a blunt object, but not for cutting. I use my edges for cutting, and that's the performance I want to get out of them. And if I'm doing harder use tasks that don't require a very, very sharp knife, you know, then I'll use a different knife or a shallower edge. But, you know, I have a lot of knives, so if you only have 1 or 2 knives, then, you know, it might be different for you. So you know, everybody's different, and everybody's budget, and even the processes they sharpen with and what they have to sharpen with. So you kind of got to use what you got and what works. But let me know down in the comments if you like micro bevels, and what your process is like, and why you like to use them. I think I mentioned most of the reasons, but I'd still like to hear it, even if it's the same thing I mentioned. I appreciate it, guys. Peace.